Hello, welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. This week we are at Intely at Sea 2022, which is a cruise ship, and that's how I met Tonigua. And we met on the dance floor last night of all places. You can see, if you can see by our background, we are in a stateroom, and thankfully for her and her resilience, she and Jackie got up early and searched all over trying to find this interview. Tonigua, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Tonigua, tell me. Oops, I had you on mute. Tell me a little bit about how you got into long-term care. I know you're an RN, you're from Cleveland, but tell me about your initiation story. Why did you get into healthcare? Who got you in here?
Well, actually, I'm 38 years old and I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. I was a nursing assistant, or in Ohio, we call it STNA, for 10 years before I became a nurse. I am now a bachelor's prepared nurse. Long-term care is where I spent most of my time as a STNA. So I watch each role on all the way up to management when I transfer over to the clinical role. And historically, traditionally in Ohio, nursing home nurses or long-term care nurses do not respect hospital nurses. But because I have had the experience to do both, it's a whole nother atmosphere, a whole nother experience.
I didn't understand that.
That's okay. One second. This is real time. We're on a real cruise, people.
Okay.
We got phones going on. We got speakers. We're still good.
All right. So with that being said, how COVID touched me the most is my mom had got COVID. She turned into basically a dementia patient. We had a couple runs back and forth to the ER where I had to advocate as a daughter and as a mother. As a daughter for my mother, because the staff at the hospital was not. She was pulse oxygen at 96%, on which in the clinical world is okay. But her cognition was not where I needed it to be. I had a ER doctor tell me remotely that because of her age, we had to consult with Gerald Psych to rule out dementia. And I forgot I was a nurse.
Mm.
When I snapped back and realized I was a nurse, I was able to tell the doctor or remind the doctor that dementia and delirium look the same to civilians. But because we're both clinicians, we know that dementia does not happen overnight. So I need you to find the source. So what I need you to do is run our ABG stat. And the doctor kind of looked at me and said, "What do you mean? Run them stat. I need them stat." And when they ran the ABGs, which is an arterial blood gas, it is a more accurate level of blood oxygen. It was an 8% difference. My mother was living at 88% rather than 96% for days. They immediately admitted her to ICU. She had a 10-day stay. COVID. We thought she was gonna die.
And did she make it out?
She did. She's at home watching my son right now.
Thank you, Mom, while we're on the cruise. That's an amazing story. I thought it was going to be a sad ending. I'm glad.
No.
I'm glad that it came out so positive. Tell me about the impact that COVID had on you. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about your peers in the healthcare world?
Well, the major thing was infection control. A lot of things were taken for granted. A lot of things were disregarded. And when I say disregarded, I mean like I had heard something where they were recommending nurses to keep the IV pumps outside of rooms so that nurses would not be able to would not have to stay in a room with a COVID patient. But the standard that I go by, have always and never would go against, is I need to see my patient when I'm delivering IV meds. The door closed, pressed on a tubing system is going to prevent the IV from getting to her anyway. So just things that were taken for granted as far as infection control, and things that were thought to be the solution to a civilian, was not so much the way it actually went inside of the clinical environment.
On the positives, on the positive front, what did you learn about yourself after 2 3 years grueling through a pandemic that most of the time people were blaming nursing homes, the press was negative? What did you learn about yourself on the positive side?
I was able to delegate and talk to a lot of families because they were restricted from coming to the facility. And then, but because I am who I am as far as a patient advocate, just because that could be me, that could be my mom. It was my mom. It has been me. So, with that being said, when they hear my voice or they see my face through the glass, they felt more comfortable that everything was going to be okay, that I was going to be able to take care of the patient. I knew how to take care of the patient. I knew how to delegate the task to my staff to make that happen.
Going back to your, you've been working in long-term care for a long time. You must have some amazing stories. Is there a specific story that stands out that if you were going to tell your mom or you're going to tell your son, hey, I did this for this resident taught me such, I changed their life in this way? Do you have any memories that stand out like this was life changing for me?
Mm,
Or something funny, someone who got your sense of humor? Or
I tell a lot of stories because I teach nursing assistants as well. But I tell a lot of stories that has happened in long term care. And one of the stories that I can tell is kind of like a comparison. There were two individuals that were young men, both in they were both quadriplegics, and the one quadriplegic had like a negative perspective of life.
Mhm.
And at the time I was 21 years old, and he asked me how old I was, and whatever age I was, he wished that he was that age, because before his accident, that's what that he wouldn't have been in that situation. Um, Compared to he was like a gunshot wound victim, and then the other young man, he was actually stealing somebody's car or whatever it was. He told me that he just thanked God. He knew the kind of lifestyle he was living. He knew that it came with consequences, and he just thanked God for preserving his life. He actually went home. The other young man died.
Hmm.
Yeah. So just being, I tell all my staff, approach is everything. And just being that positive impact can change somebody's life, and will, and has.
In terms of your legacy as a nurse, like one of the reasons we're doing this with IntelliCare is we want to document what you did during the pandemic. But you've been a nurse a lot longer than the 3 years of the pandemic. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind you? What do you want your family members to remember you for? What do you want this 20-year-old STNA who's working underneath you to remember you for?
Compassion. Um, I can, like I said, I've been in the field a long time. I can tell you what you need to know to uh, be a productive nursing assistant, be a productive nurse. But if compassion is not there, this is not the right industry.
Hmm.
And so that's the legacy that I leave.
In terms of advice, if you have, a 19-year-old version of Tonigua that's lives down the street from you, and she sees you go every single day to work and working 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 10 days in a row, and she comes up to you and she says, Tonigua, I'm thinking about going in long-term care. Um, why and why shouldn't I do it? What kind of advice would you give her?
Well, um, to a civilian that's not really attached to clinical environments, all I see is scrubs and the accessories that come with it.
Mm.
They don't see it's not a walk in the park. It's never a good day when you have to tell somebody that their loved one did not make it through the night. You have to remember everything about your patients. You have to get to know them. So, and on the nursing level, I got to remember what meds. I got to remember what disease processes. I got to remember when not to give this, what vital signs. So it's not just like you're working in a factory. You have to be able to critically pull all the information together to make you a functional nurse.
Mhm. And if she presses you and she says, "I think I want to do this," what would you tell her to do? Would you tell her
Let's
to go
go.
volunteer? Would,
I will actually tell her to come sit in my nursing assistant training class and start off in home care. Because the way I describe home care is kind of like a snapshot of what you're going to get in a nursing home, being that you're only going to be there a limited amount of hours, limited amount of tasks that need to be completed, and you're one-on-one compared to when you come over to the nursing home, you may have 15 patients that you're responsible for.
mm. I want to read you a quote. It's by Andy Bruni, and it says, "The best classroom in the world is at the feet of an elderly person." What have you learned from the elderly in our country?
A lot. Um, it all is based off of multiple factors. So the culture of that person, what era they grew up in, what economical factors are involved is a lot that you can pull from what they bring to the table. They can tell you how they want a certain thing. And sometimes nurses are so task oriented that they're looking to complete the task the way they were taught to do it. But if you're working with this person and they want it that way, for whatever reason, as long as it does not cross infection control lines, you do it that way. And you may be more comfortable doing it with the next person that way too.
Hmm. I want to ask you some rapid fire questions. Before we do that, I want to take a small break and
Okay.
thank our sponsor. This episode of LTC Heroes is brought to you by Experience Care, the only long term care software developed by EHR users and clinicians every step of the way. Visit experience.care/guarantee to get your free profitability consultation today. All right, and we are back. Thank you, Experience Care and IntelliCare, for making this interview possible and for me meeting Tonigua. Tonigua, I'm going to start off with some rapid fire questions, and I want to ask you, do you have a favorite failure of yours? Is there something that you thought was going to be really negative? You tripped and you fell, but you got back up and made you a stronger person.
Well, I do. I was put out of nursing school. And it was because I was going to clinicals and I got sick. I called a student's phone instead of the instructor didn't have a phone. You can hear the instructor in the background saying, "I know you were sick yesterday, just bring an excuse next week." But when I got in class the next week, they said because I didn't talk to the instructor directly, it was considered a no call, no show for clinicals, which was grounds for termination out of the program. I was going into my third term of the course for the overall GPA of 98%, and I was excused from the course. I thought life was over. I took another entrance exam for another school, like maybe a year later. I passed the test, but but I found out I was pregnant, and I couldn't go. I wanted to go the next semester. They said I would have to take another test because they went away with those exams. And a year after that, I started Hondros. I'm a double alumni through Hondros College here in Cleveland, and I have a bachelor's degree in nursing.
That is a cool favorite failure story. I didn't expect that. Your friend Jackie, who I interviewed an hour ago, made me tear up. You made me tear up again at 10:15. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
The last question that I'm going to ask you for rapid fire is, if you could have one gigantic billboard on the outskirts of Cleveland that millions of people would see over a month or 2 months driving back and forth to work, what would that billboard say and why?
The billboard would say, "A Promise to Care East Healthcare Headquarters is we are the gateway to safety." And who is A Promise to Care East? It is my duo business company. One side we do training, healthcare training, so STNA training in Ohio, as well as CPR certifications that are aligned with the American Heart Association. On our home care side, of course, we are approved by Ohio Passport, and we now accept CareSource and United Health patients.
Fantastic. I like it. And I'm going to be in Cleveland in September. I'm doing a summit, an LTC Heroes Summit for 2 days for STNAs in Ohio. So maybe we can meet up there.
Yes,
that would be
of course.
Great. And lastly, as we sign off, the reason we're here is because of IntelliCare. Why did you come? What part of the community made you want to come join a cruise with more than 500 nurses and dance with them like we did last night? Maybe hug them and be in the hot tub with them.
Well, to be honest, IntelliCare is one of the best employers that I can say that I worked for. And the reason is just over the 20 years that I've been in the field, you've never witnessed or experienced, I've never experienced an employer give so much back to their team as far as appreciation.
I can second that. So thank you so much for IntelliCare being here. Tonigua, thank you for joining LTC Heroes. It was a pleasure.
Yep.
And that wraps up what I hope to be a fun and insightful conversation from some of the frontline caregivers and leaders in our industry. A special thanks to IntelliCare, who made this event possible. This interview and many others this week were held at an event called Intely at Sea for Nursing Professionals Week cruise held from May 9th to the 13th of 2022. IntelliCare set sail to reimagine and celebrate a new type of Nurses Week. IntelliCare, thank you for supporting our nurses. Now head over to www.ltcheroes.com/community and let's do care better together today. LTC Heroes is more than a podcast. It's a community.